Okay, we are live. Just want to say a quick hello to everybody at Rev Tech 2023. Really excited about this opportunity to speak with you all. And then here I have Mollie, who's a colleague, a mentor of mine. And so we're both just going to kind of host a Q&A here for everybody and excited to talk about all things, marketing automation, sales automation, revenue analytics, and kind of operations in general. I'll kick it off and then I'll pass the mic over to Mollie. My name is Kyle Freitas. I recently co-founded the operations company, and we specialize kind of in all things operations, marketing operations, sales operations, and so on. And we just help companies with tools like HubSpot, Salesforce, Marketo, as well as things like process and compliance and all the good things there. So data. And it's been a journey so far. First time starting my own business, but excited to be on this journey and share maybe a little bit of that with you guys today as we kind of talk through some of these answers. So I will pass it over to Mollie and let her kind of introduce herself to everybody as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having us here today. I'm Mollie Bodensteiner, and I currently run global revenue operations with a focus on strategy, planning, and process and systems at Deel. I have been in the revenue operations space before it was even cool to be in revenue operations. Really started my career doing marketing and sales operations and have continued to oversee different revenue operations teams and practices over the last about 6 years now. Former Marketo alumni, so love all things MarTech and excited to geek out and answer some questions today. So again, thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Mollie's definitely the GOAT of RevOps. At least that's what I have coined her, called her. So I'm just super excited every time we get to hop onto a call. Well, cool. I think today we're just going to have a little fun and keep it casual, between 15 and 20 minutes here. We had a kind of a crazy idea. I guess it's not too crazy. Everyone's using it, but just
we're
log
jumping on
chat.
A bandwagon here, right? Let's see what spits out at us.
Let's see it. So we're gonna hop into ChatGPT by Open AI, and we're gonna ask it some questions, and hopefully that stimulates or starts some conversation here, and we can kind of respond to the questions, and maybe it'll be kind of fun. We'll see how good it does. But I'll start with kind of the first one. I'm going to ask it, what is a good question to ask about marketing automation? That was the first thing that I thought of. So now I'm going to ask Mollie what ChatGPT thinks is a good question. So what are the key benefits and challenges of implementing marketing automation in a company's overall marketing strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Man, we all might be unemployed here soon if this thing starts taking over the world. So I think when we think about, the key benefits are also part of the key challenges, right? So when I think about, what is the value of implementing, a marketing automation tool? And ultimately what you're trying to do as a business is drive efficiency, right? At the end of the day, like any sort of automation should be supporting your people, supporting your process by doing so in leveraging technology. So when you're implementing a marketing automation tool, you're really looking for, how do I supplement process and build efficient process through automation? Specifically in this case, it's around marketing, generally campaign management, data orchestration. But anything you're trying to automate has to tie back to process, internal process, but that needs to be in support of the customer experience. So, the high level vision you have is like, how do I better support my customer experience? Your strategy of that is like, we need to figure out, what that experience is, how we build that out, and your tactics are there in implementing an automation type tool to execute on that. So I think, that's ultimately like the value you're getting, not only from an efficiency standpoint, a consistency standpoint, having centralization, better metrics, better management, better experience in general. But your challenges on that is, right, like a tool is only as good as what you tell a tool to do, right? A marketing automation platform is only as good as the strategy that you have that it's supporting and the process that it's supporting. In my time at Marketo, I worked on their professional services team, and every single every single customer would say, like, I don't feel like we're using as much as we should be, right? Like, how do we do more? How do we do more? How do we do more? And it's like, well, these tools, a lot of them are endless, right? Like, there are limits, but like, it takes a long time to hit them, and they evolve with you as an organization and as your strategy grows. Like, if you're not doing webinars, you shouldn't use the webinar functionality, right? Like, very common things like that. So I think a lot of the challenges that people have is like making sure they're aligning what they need to be doing back to the business and back to the process and back to, the problem that you're ultimately trying to solve versus like, oh yeah, just because it can do this, it should do this. The other thing I think you run into with like implementations of, marketing automation or leverage of marketing automation is that you don't do things for scale. And I think that tends to hurt a lot of people as well, as like, how do I build things in a way that are repeatable and I can scale within the platform and be more efficient within the platform? And that's a piece of like leverage that I think people tend to not fully get.
And just to kind of expand on that, I think folks, they want to adopt marketing automation because they think it is going to make their lives easier, their day-to-day lives easier, right? We're going to automate everything and then we can kind of set and forget it. That's a myth, right? Like, that's what I've learned for sure. I definitely thought, okay, automation, cool. If then do that, right? So let's just set up all of our, actions and triggers and we're good to go. But what I found out very quickly is there's maintenance involved with automation. There's troubleshooting, there's optimization. To Mollie's point, there's a ton of process, and process keeps changing as different people come and go. And so kind of back to the question, I think, and I wrote a post about this on LinkedIn yesterday. I think a lot of folks go into marketing automation. They want to do it. They see the key benefits of driving efficiency and automating everything. What they don't see is that you kind of have to get it right from the start, or else you're automating inefficiency, right? And automating inefficiency, I think, is more dangerous than not automating just at all, right? So
Right.
If we're automating like something like a process or a workflow that is set up wrong, well, now you're going to have a huge mess to clean up on the back end, right? If you don't have someone in place to maintain that and kind of watch over that, maybe you look back in a month, now you have even a bigger mess. And so I think that's kind of where I'm going with this, is like, the key benefits, like you said, are also the challenges. Cause like, yeah, we want to automate, we want to work more efficiently. And we really want to, tie this to our marketing strategy and, run more campaigns. We want to be able to go to market more efficiently.
Yep.
But you really have to start off on the right foot or you get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. And like, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should, right? And I think like figuring out those fine lines come into place.
Absolutely. Well, cool. I think we gave that question some love. You want to ask it another one and kind of see it? I'm having fun with like asking it now with seeing what.
Yeah, I was like, we might be here all night. Yeah, hit it with another one. This is good. That was good. I was impressed by that.
For sure. So I just said last time, what is a good question to ask about marketing automation? Let me get a little bit more specific with the sales automation piece. So like, how does sales automation, or I kind of have to ask it to spit out a question. So what is a good question to ask about how to implement, it's like a test, implement sales automation correctly? Let's add a little bit of a layer there. Okay, cool. And I like how it's quick and it's very fast.
I'm like very like anxious to see what it says.
Okay, so what are the best practices for integrating sales automation into a sales process to ensure maximum efficiency and effectiveness?
What is a best practice that we can implement into a sales process to maximize efficiency and effectiveness? I think, one of the things that I think about is like anytime you're trying to implement a new process is like actually setting standards. And I think we don't measure like the effectiveness or the efficiency like of our SOPs and our selling processes, or we do it at such like a broad level. So when you are trying to drive change, like picking a specific point that you're really focused on, right? So like maybe that's demo booked to demo completed, and having baseline metrics so that you understand like what are the behavioral changes or the process changes or the points of automation or technology adjustments that I think are going to drive this. Great example is, Chili Piper. We're using Chili Piper to book demos on our website. We start to see that we only have about like a 60% demo booking, or like form fill out to demo booking ratio. Like pretty good, not great, right? Like if somebody fills out the form but they don't book on a calendar, like why didn't they take that next step? They did the hard work, right? Now we're trying to give them the value. Like what are the things we could adjust in our process to improve that? And trying to be really thoughtful on like making a singular change and looking at results versus making tons of changes that you can't ever tell what worked or what didn't work. And so, when you're implementing new technology, when you're testing new processes, like thinking about champion challenger, right? So I'm going to, step one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the strict booker. I'm going to open it up to more time zones, right? Like, let's see what result that gets. Okay, that seemed to work. Step two, like I'm going to adjust how far out in the future they can book. I'm going to remove it from 1 week to 2 weeks. Do we get more bookings that way? Like, and starting to like use kind of more multi-needle threading to test against versus like, I could do both of those things, but I wouldn't know which one was actually the one that drove the result or not. And it might, so kind of playing them against each other. I don't know. What are your thoughts on your end as you see it in like kind of process improvement pieces?
Yeah, and I like what you're kind of going with that. Just kind of looking at every step of the process and understanding how to optimize the whole process, and how we can automate certain things to help with things like conversions, right? Or more meetings booked, because you're kind of starting with the ultimate goal, right? Like we want more meetings booked, or we want folks to move quicker through our funnel. We want to get our hand raisers to the right rep very quickly. And so I think looking at kind of the whole process holistically, understanding what the goal is, what the strategy is, and then kind of implementing, integrating the automation side piece to kind of accommodate that. And then you can kind of, tweak the dials to meet the goal. And so I that's kind of where my head was going to. I think a best practice that I immediately think of anytime I'm trying to integrate any type of automation. So in this case, sales automation, is to just keep it as simple as possible. Because oftentimes, especially when you have a large sales team or a sales ops team that's kind of managing this automation, if you start adding layers of complexity to it, it's hard to maintain. And a lot of the times it doesn't help you achieve that goal, right? Because you're spending so much time troubleshooting, maintaining it, educating and enabling your team. Things go wrong, and now you have sales reps after the meetings get booked have to hand it off on the back end in Salesforce, right? And so how do they do that? And so adding those layers of complexity makes things really difficult, whereas the best practice is just like keep things as simple as possible. Sometimes it's hard to keep things simple because in operations, and I think
because some things are hard, right?
Yeah. And I think our minds are just wired that way. It's like we want to solve a complex problem with a complex solution. Like we think that's what's needed, and so we start drawing out these huge lucid charts or whatever. And we really figure out, what, like, is it really this easy?
Sometimes it's just a field, right? And like, that's something that I think I had to be okay with. As I grew in my career, and like, things that I always like was really worried about is like, oh, am I creating tech debt? Am I like, what am I, and this is for all you guys in the audience, I'm going to give you the grossest analogy that you'll ever hear in your life. Right. But like, is it going to scab or is it going to scar? Right. So like, that's how I think about like architectural decisions and like process decisions. And that is like, all right, is what I'm building like going to detrimentally like reduce my ability to scale? Like, do I know that this is the final process? It is going to be the process and how we do business for the next year. And like, I should build 100% towards this. Or is this something that like, we're not sure of? and I shouldn't build it in a way that I'm like fully confident in, and like the ability to make changes or adapt are going to be a lot harder. I think about this a lot for people who are implementing like CPQ type platforms, right? Like when you're implementing CPQ, like you really need to make sure that like your products aren't going to change every 2 weeks or every month. They're like grow, right? It's very extensive work. And so you will scar yourself if you build yourself too deep into that versus like, okay, we're not ready for CPQ. We're going to do products and price book. It's going to be a little hacky, but it's going to be a scab. Like it's not going to leave us with this like huge burden down the line until we're ready. So that's my gross like decision-making analogy of like, is it a scab or is it going to scar?
Question to ask around revenue analytics and how it helps SaaS companies grow. So are we going to break it, or do you think it's going to?
Can you break it? Can it be broken?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. Like I've asked a question before and it kind of says like, it queries and then it says like, oh, like something like we've never heard that, or like we don't have the data to support that. But here's what it's spitted back here. So it says, how does revenue analytics impact a SaaS company's growth, and what metrics should be tracked to make data-driven business decisions? And I'm excited about this one with you because I think you're definitely more qualified than I in this area to really.
The thing that's killing me with this chat thing is that it's giving me like long-tailed questions. So let's start at like the end of like, what are the key metrics that you need to track, right? I mean, I think there's obviously like all of the obvious indicators, revenue, like velocity, right? Average deal cycle, ACV, and NRD, all of that kind of stuff, right? There's the core metrics, but like then there's more of like your indicating metrics that I think people tend to not focus on, right? Like, so when you're looking at like, okay, what's my close rate? For example, like that's your top level metrics, but it's like, then what's all factoring into that? And those are like truly, when you think about the dials and levers, like those are your influence metrics that you actually have control of to get your top level ones. So I think a lot of the things like you've got to pay attention to is like time to touch, I think is huge, especially if you're making investments, you're doing inbound, like no leads left behind. How soon are you reaching out to people, right? The other thing that I think a lot of people forget about is like, well, this isn't necessarily a metric. It is a metric, but it's not a standard one, is like quality, right? So like, what's the quality of your data? So when you think about things that I think a lot about as an operations professional, which is so weird to say, is like, I think a lot about productivity, right? So how do I make my sellers like more productive? So I know that if I can cut time prospecting by an hour, I get about a 20% lift in output, right? Because I'm taking time from them doing something that's very like manual and tedious and having them do more impactful activities. So when I think about that, it's like, what feeds into that? Well, quality fits into this, right? Like if I can give them quality things to reach out to, if I can help coach them in like, what's the right next best action, and use data and use things to build that, like my productivity metrics improve. So I think like when we think about kind of some, and this is like totally, I could sit and like tell you all the SaaS metrics you can measure and like put it in a pretty dashboard, right? But it's like more important, I think you think about like, how do you influence the metrics that the business is measuring against? And like a lot of the times that I'm spending on is like productivity metrics, and like, how do I make people more efficient and more effective? Like think about like, if you're go close an opportunity in your Salesforce, right? Like, and time yourself. Like, how long does it take to do this, right? How do you make this easier? How do you make this more intuitive? How do you make sure like you're building what you need, but not more than what you need? Because like that time matters.
That is a good question. But yeah, thanks a lot, Mollie.
Really thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks to the audience. Hopefully you enjoyed it and you got some value out of it. And enjoy the other sessions and all of that. So take care.
Thanks, guys.